for good grades.
I wish I was better at relationships.
I wish I was an artist.
I wish I had a better relationship with my wife.
I wish for a life full of happiness.
I wish I may. I wish I might have the wish. I wish tonight.
Hi there. Welcome to Beyond Wishful Thinking and Sherry. Happy Monday. Today I'm going to be speaking a little bit about honesty. It's always something that's interesting to discuss, and I want to share some thoughts with you today, and hopefully you can share some with me. Below you can find all that you need to connect to my booklet that I put together. The booklet is about how to get more energy into your life and understanding what it is that depletes our energy. So have a look at that. So I was thinking a little bit about honesty due to some of the work I did this week. And I talked a little bit back in November, I believe, about telling our children about Santa and what is it that we want for our children. I think if we spoke to a lot of people, being lied to feels like the thing that hurts the most. And I think if we have children who tell lies, that concerns us. And yet we all kind of live in a world where lies are told. And so I just was curious about that. I came across something this morning in some reading that I was doing. And the comment was that honesty is how you are toward others. And integrity is how honest you are with yourself. And I really liked that. It gave me some thought. I've had some discussions with people today. And I just decided that's what I was going to try and give some thought processes around. So we have heard people speak about white lies. A white lie is something that's considered trivial or harmless. Such lies are often told to spare hurting someone's feelings. The term dates back to the 14th century and is linked to historical color associations that suggest that white symbolizes morally pure and that black symbolizes sinister intent. And so that's where the concept of a white lie comes from. The idea that it's not going to hurt someone. Often it's told to preserve something. And so another definition or measuring stick is that a real lie, the intent is malicious and the consequence is serious, while a white lie often is harmless. It's the bending of truth and the intent is benign or positive, and usually the consequence isn't major. And so why would we lie? What is it about that we want a high level of, and yet we all have told lies? I don't know if I agree with what I'm about to read, but this particular article claimed that a white lie is told to protect others. It's for self-protection, and it's to avoid awkward situations. The part I'm not resonating with is self-protection. If we are lying for a reason of non-harm, then I'm not sure why there would be self-protection needed. Real lies are told to benefit the self. They're self-serving, and they create pain and discomfort for others. So that I can get behind. Certainly believe that would be something that we could agree to. Scientists have decided that a term for well-intended falsehoods, as the article states, are called pro-social lies. But the problem with determining things like this is social is something based on knowledge and economics and all of that. So then who decides what is for the best? What is for the best outcome? So we could maybe fall into some traps in that thinking. The other kind of passage that I saw that I enjoyed thinking about is that honesty is like a knife. Some of us use it far too often and for all the wrong reasons to hurt people who we care about. Sometimes it's better to be sensible than to be honest. Honest words are only one dimension of honesty. There are many dimensions to it. Honest thoughts honest actions, honest intentions, honest emotions, and honest expression, to name a few. And that leads me to another part about honesty that was kind of, I think, where I resonated the deepest, and we'll get to that in a minute. It's talking about the best honesty examples. And I really think that the first one is the hardest for all of us. And that one is admitting when you are wrong. So if we want people we intermingle with to be honest, we have to demonstrate that in how we are. And so admitting when you are wrong, that's hard to do. And it comes at a cost sometimes, because when we admit that we're wrong, or we're willing to accept fault or blame for a portion or all of something, it can make the other person feel that they're excused, and they might not be. There may be fault or intent or blame that they also need to accept. And so sometimes accepting, or admitting, not accepting, admitting that we are wrong is painful because of that cost. And so if we are willing to admit that, though, the concept that others would understand is that we don't have hidden agendas, that who we are is what we are, that idea. Honest people are willing to say that they were wrong. This just isn't an issue of honesty. It's also an issue of having the strength to change and grow as a person. And so that's the part that I'm trying to get at, is when you look at little children, there's a fear of punishment, or there's a fear of maybe less. Kids are often concerned with, is it fair? Am I being treated equal? And if there's a fear of losing that, then it might be difficult for them to admit they're wrong. And sometimes in the work that I've done in the past, I have heard myself say, this isn't about blame. This is about me understanding that you did something and I might need to give you better skills. So all I need is an admission from you. But I think we live in a punitive society in a lot of levels, and we want people to admit they're wrong, but if it costs them, it's hard to do. Choosing not to cheat. Cheating is dishonest, while following the rules is honest. Sometimes we get the opportunity to cheat, and we might even know that we can get away with it. But an honest person will follow the rules no matter what, because they know it's the right thing to do. Cheating is difficult. Again, there's a fear of losing if we aren't the strongest or the best. And so I think in the moment of cheating, it feels like it's better to cheat than to feel the shame of loss. But if we are content with who we are, and we've learned to accept that we are wrong and that there's no loss in that for us, there could be loss in the world, but for us, because we can live with ourselves at the end of the day, that's kind of what that's about, then cheating would follow in line with admitting you're wrong. Cheating wouldn't be something we would be compelled to do. Something that comes to mind is not really about cheating, but it's an honesty. I delivered papers when I was young, and my parents had a property, and it was a corner property. So the street went on two sides, and people would walk across our property to cut out the corner. And my dad had a path in our grass, and it bothered him. And so he drilled into us children that we should not do that when we deliver papers, that we should walk on the places that are meant for us to walk. And I know that I did that initially because of what he wanted more than I felt it mattered. But I do know that to this day, I really have a hard time taking a shortcut, because that's in my mind from all of those years ago, that was important to somebody that I thought had high enough value, I suppose, that I should listen. And I understood and was empathetic with the property owner, that I shouldn't maybe have his property less than because I was too lazy to walk on the sidewalk. So it's instilling in us a strength an awareness, an openness, a willingness to see that we're not all the same and that what matters to somebody else is important enough to follow. That's not really a rule. Like I said, there are rules, but there's an adage in life that rules are meant to be broken. And I don't think they're developed to be broken, but I think sometimes rules do need to be looked at. And sometimes I wonder if that's what makes it easier for people to choose to consider lying because a rule doesn't make sense anymore. So maybe rather than cheating or changing who we are, maybe we could change the rules and have people agree on those rules so that it's something that we can all be on an equal playing field. Saying when you've had your fair share. Again, really simple stuff, but really hard sometimes. If we like something and we need to share it, it's hard to stop. If you're thinking about a lovely box of chocolates and there's a favorite that you have, it's really difficult sometimes to not want what you want more than being willing to share it. Or if there's an equality factor of sharing something that you're going to pay attention and you're going to stop when you've had your allotment or your fair share. And again, if there's any discomfort inside of you going, yeah, okay, I do struggle with that. I want the bigger portion, then that's something you can work on. Speaking up when something upsets you. I think that's big. That's really difficult for some people because, again, there's a lot of fear built into this. Sometimes honesty means having the courage to speak when you don't have to. Many people are so polite or shy that they won't speak when they really should. A classic example of this is when someone is doing something that is upsetting. They might be saying something offensive without realizing it, or they might keep using your things. You can speak up and say, this is how I feel about this situation. This is honest. But many people will stay quiet or even pretend they aren't upset. They do this with good intentions to be polite, but it doesn't resolve a problem. We have an idiom for this. It's called you're being walked all over. And so honesty affects our behavior. And honesty is important so that we can understand what we need, what we want, and get that while also giving other people what they need and want. So politeness for the sake of politeness isn't always helpful. Saying an unpopular truth. Throughout history, brave people have been honest about sharing the truth, even if it was harmful to them. One example is Galileo. He was oppressed for sharing his research. Sharing the truth, even if it's harmful, is difficult. But what would you be stealing from the future, so to speak, in the case of Galileo? The authorities didn't like what he was saying because it undermined their power. And that's huge. And we live in a world where it's difficult sometimes to be able to speak up. I remember one time expressing in an interview that I was a part of how difficult it was to speak because I was so nervous that I had no saliva left in my mouth. And it was a boardroom table full of lawyers and social workers. And I was a foster mom at the time. And a question had been asked that was very difficult to answer because it meant that there were social workers at the table who had not done their job. But I felt very strongly that I was there as an advocate for the child in my home. And so I did speak up politely, professionally, very nervous, and it was heard by a higher level, and it was dealt with. And later in the interview around it, I indicated what I already said, the piece about, and it was explained that is courage, is to speak up even when it's difficult. And so we need more of that, and we don't brazenly do it. We don't undermine someone, but we do need to be brave and to have courage and to speak truth when it's needed. Showing disappointment and emotion. So if we don't show to the people around us our emotions, we're not being honest. Now, there's a difference between an all out rage where we think, well, we don't want to see that. Sometimes emotions. I know I'm very embarrassed if I cry when I speak. I am getting much better at that. But it's because we're afraid to show our emotion, and emotion is honest. And if we can learn to do a little bit of that, that also then helps people see us as someone that is trustworthy. Not on its own, but in conjunction with all of these things. People who hide their emotions, even when asked how they feel, are often being dishonest so they don't appear weak. But the reality is that everyone feels sad at times, and we should be okay with that. And that might be where we're at with our mental health, mental wellness, mental awareness, whatever we want to call that, is it's okay to say, I find something hard. It's okay to share that this is a bad day. We say those words, we want to believe it, but I think we still live in a world where I'm not sure everyone meets it the way we hope to someday. And that's what makes it difficult. And it's much easier to say, I'm fine when we're not. This one seems really basic, but returning something that belongs to others. If you have something that doesn't belong to you, the right thing is to return it. In childhood, most people stole something small. The honest thing would be to give it back to the person it rightly belongs to. That's one that I have always had. I don't know why it was instilled in me entirely, whether I was just born with that fiber. But if I were to ever steal anything, I'm trying to think if I ever stole anything as a kid and got caught. I'm sure. Oh, well, yeah. But I didn't get caught, but I still feel shame about it. It took me a minute for it to come back to me. I was stealing as a part of a group, and I was used because of my young age and my cute factor, and the belief in those days, especially, that a young person wouldn't steal. And so I find that fascinating that I didn't seem to mind about that. And I think part of it was that I wasn't connected to what was being stolen. I didn't necessarily even get what was being stolen. I was the decoy so that older kids could steal things. Um, and so when I spoke earlier in a podcast about the porch pirates and the man that was putting the videos in to catch them, and some of them were stealing in front of their children, and that's how we end up with generations of people who don't learn this basic concept of returning something that belongs to others. Maybe we can slowly become dishonest when we're not connected to the crime. People are talking about social media. I know I've watched my daughter when I walk into her computer area and she's on classes for her schooling, that the screens are all black. And the professors have indicated it's difficult to teach people when you can't see their faces. I have been on certain summits and classrooms in the job that I do, and there are a lot of people who find that discouraging or difficult to be on an actual screen because of their own um, insecurities, but then they can say things and do things with that obscurity that's hurtful to others. So I think it's a part of the human condition that being connected to what we do makes it more real for us. And so maybe it was easier to steal or be a part of a group that stole when I was young like that. I was probably 7. It was okay for me. But now, if I were to steal something, I could never enjoy the thing I stole. I have different values, different systems of belief in place. And so, how do we garner those for our children and the people that we are caregivers for? And it's maybe just modeling the simple things that this isn't mine and I need to return it. And I need to show that it has the same value as not stealing something. It could have been borrowed, it could have been left at our place maybe. And so finding that importance to show that it's important, to be aware that it doesn't belong to us, is a part of honesty. When we give people feedback, we need to be careful to be honest. The best example of this is when people ask us what the meal they cooked was like. So there's two sides to that. I did a lot of cooking when I was growing up at home. My mother was busy. And so often I would come home from school to a note. This is what's for supper. Could you please do this with it? And I would cook. And because I cooked, my siblings were very rough and they would make comments about the meal. They didn't like it and there was no criticism about it that was to build me. That criticism was to take me down. It was, I suppose, honest. I likely wasn't the best cook. Um, I think mom did a decent job of indicating that it wasn't up for discussion. And if they could do better, they could attempt it the next time. I don't know that it ever happened. But I also had an experience where I have been told that my ability to give feedback is beneficial. And so the way that I learned that was by being close to a couple artists. One was my first husband who drew well, and he would bring something to me, and I would look at it and I would say, "Oh, I don't know, something's off about that," or "It's not dark enough here," or something like that. And he told me that bringing artwork to me was enjoyable because he knew he wasn't perfect at it. He knew that there was room for improvement. And so when he brought it to me, he was asking for help in a sense. So later in life, we had a basement apartment and there was a artist who lived locally and they were building a house and so they rented the basement apartment. And often she had three children, so she would paint at night and she brought the paintings and she would tap on my kitchen door and she would say, "What do you think?" And so, because of what I had already learned in my life, I knew what she was looking for and I was honest with her about the feedback. I would start with the enjoyment I had for the painting, but I would insert what I might have struggled with. One painting that comes to mind was of a flower garden in a beautiful setting with a wonderful country home behind it. And the boy that was in the garden with the watering can didn't look like his legs were there, even though he was standing in things up to his knees. And she indicated that that was a good eye because, in fact, she had never drawn the legs. She only drew the upper body and she didn't get the look just right. I have a couple paintings in my home that she gave me free of charge for being able to do this with me because she saw the value that I could give her that would be like anyone else who might buy her product. So sharing constructive feedback isn't about telling somebody to do it the way we want it. It's about helping people see what they are likely already aware of, or if they're not aware of, they're looking to someone they trust to keep them safe and to give them that feedback. Doing the right thing when you didn't have to. I was working on this with some children this week, and it was fascinating to understand how difficult that is to explain. So we're not honest if we do the so-called right thing because we don't know what the right thing is necessarily, but we have a gut feeling. So we do the things that we don't have to do, the things that we, well, so the example here is if you're in the store and knock something off the shelf and it breaks, you might be able to just walk away and pretend you didn't do it. So there's a sense that you need to be aware that honesty comes from how you act when you're alone. Honesty comes from what you do simply because of what's inside of you and the feeling that's connected to doing the right thing. Correcting a mistake that benefited you. So another one I really like, you go through a cashier and they don't charge you correctly. I find it fascinating when I go back how often they're surprised. Sometimes now you get the sense that they'll say to you, "Why did you come back?" There was a day if you didn't go back, that cashier had to take that out of her paycheck. I was a cashier once. I understand that. That's not why I go back, but I wonder now if maybe that isn't always how it works. So we're living in a world where people almost disrespect honesty. I don't think that's true, but I'm putting it out there as a, like the idea that we spoke of earlier, where what is dishonest, how, like, we all have a different barometer for it, and that one seems low, and yet if we're modeling that for our children, then they're going to have a higher barometer or measuring tool. And then the last one is kind of feels like it's been tacked on because of the world we live in, but not misrepresenting yourself on social media. So many people choose to present a fake and unrealistic version of their identity. People are doing that to be liked, to get ahead of a curve, to have the algorithms work to their benefit, whatever the case may be. But I'll tell you that I recently had a situation where someone indicated that because of an honest look, or the fact that I didn't portray myself in a certain way, was what got me the business. They could sense that there was an honesty about who I was, that I was okay being who I am, and that what I offered was what I had within me to give them. And so we have this idea that we need to be something different, and it isn't always the case. So that's kind of the basic thoughts about honesty that I had. I really feel that it's hard to explain to people. It's hard to teach children whose world is kind of rule based, and do this or this happens, don't do that because of this. And I want to just invite us all to be more aware of our inside, the integrity piece, the piece of us that can admit when we're wrong, can speak up when it's difficult. That situation I spoke about at the boardroom table with the social workers and lawyers, it was fascinating when I finally said it. I sat around that table probably for a couple minutes thinking, is no one going to speak to the issue? And I felt that I was the lowest on the totem pole. And as conversation moved on, I thought they're not going to talk about it. And so I did, with no saliva, feeling my heart pounding in my ears. And when I finished, the lawyer at the table said, I thought the same thing. I just didn't say it because I didn't want to muddy the waters. And so, in my opinion, what that meant was it was easier to not speak because more work had to be done. People were told their jobs weren't being done correctly. In fact, the supervisor turned and looked at her staff and said, this is a licensing issue. This needs to be addressed. And I'm not trying to tell the story to brag. I'm trying to tell the story because I believed in my heart for that child that I was looking after. And one of the things I told those children was that I was going to be there for them. I was their voice. And that's maybe what gave me the courage, but I want that for people. I want you to know what your voice is. I want you to understand that honesty isn't about losing, even if we might lose. Honesty is about living with yourself. And that is the integral part. That's what brings integrity. And the white lie, yeah, I think there's times where we might just say, this meal is good enough. And when someone says, did you like dinner? You can say yes, because it was good enough. If you want to give feedback, make it honest and say, this meal was good enough for tonight. I'm so grateful you cooked dinner. Next time, I wonder if we could try a different seasoning. What do you think about the dinner? And start conversation, because the person asking might think, yeah, I wondered that, but they didn't know how to ask. And so sometimes people could be asking something, wanting more. And by us just not being honest, they are left without the learning that they're looking for. And so honesty is more about understanding emotion, being open to seeing emotion. Even a child who is melting down can be calmed down, and it's not a reflection of them or us. When I did difficult to manage children, I read somewhere that sitting and singing when they are in that mode helps, and it did. It helped me almost as much or more than it helped them. And so understanding honesty as something that is a tool and that we can develop and that it will give us strength even when we lose, because we will lose by being honest. People don't want to hear what they might need to hear. I am sure those social workers, in fact, I know because there was something brought back to my supervisor that my supervisor defended because the initial concept was that I wasn't there to do that, that I was there to just report on the children. And I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that to this day. And I know that that child that day was served better because I was willing to do that. And so that's what we need to be more concerned with. And yet people want peace. They want things to go easy. They don't want to do that extra work. And that's why we often stay on a very trivial level with people. And change doesn't have to happen immediately. Sometimes experiencing a situation teaches us about the situation. And so you won't get it right the first time. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. But be willing to try. Be willing to be open to discussion. And that means that honesty is harder because often with honesty there will come something more. If someone says to you, "How are you?" and you say, "I'm fine," that's it. We're done. If somebody says, "How are you?" and you say, "I'm really struggling today." "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. What about?" Maybe it's just the weather and we have a discussion about the weather. Maybe it's about something that that person who asked me how I was could help me with. And so we want to be more open to that in my world anyway. I hope that this was illuminating for you. I hope it was a bit helpful. And I'm not going to answer questions about are white lies okay. I think it's something we all want to work on and make our own value system around. And then we want to teach the people that we're going to have in our life about that and learn together and decide what it is. I remember when the kids would play games, there is a competitiveness. And I grew up in a family where games were super competitive and they were not enjoyable. And I did not enjoy playing games. And then my kids would start to play games and they'd start to fight because that person always won or whatever the story was. And I remember saying to them, playing this together is about the time spent together. The skill you learn is secondary. The enjoyment of being together is what you should be looking for. If cheating happens, there's something else going on, and we need to talk about that. And if one person always wins, then we need to pick different games because there is a game that you will be good at. And I don't have kids who cheat at games as far as I can tell. And I know that my parents were horrible. Whether it was they didn't want to play the game and so they just were being silly, whether it's because they had other ideas about games. My father barely ever played a game, but when he did, he cheated and he laughed about it and indicated that that was how it should be. And my mother, again, she rarely played either, but when she did, she had more underhanded ways of cheating. If everybody's going to sort of just throw away the rules and have some fun with a game, absolutely. But to cheat simply for the sake of winning the game or to cheat in a way that we don't want to explain the benefits to the time spent, like to go deeper, that's what I'm talking about, is the going deeper, then I think we're losing a lot in those environments. And we have so much we can learn as a society about people having voice and being seen and being heard. And that's the beginning of all of that, I think, is honesty and learning about what it means for you. Thanks for listening. Have a great day. As much as I enjoy discussions, I also want to provide a service to people who would like more. If you want to do more than listen, get in touch with me with the links in the description. You can also email me through hello@beyondwishfulthinking.ca. And I'd like to give you content you enjoy, so please leave a review wherever you're listening to this podcast. If you're watching through my YouTube channel, leave your comments below. If you want more of Beyond Wishful Thinking podcasts, make sure to subscribe for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you are listening right now.